For 26 years, the brutal murder of Emily Carter remained unsolved, until an AI system named ForensIQ uncovered a single smudged fingerprint that led to Dennis Rowe, a drifter hiding in plain sight. Across the ocean, another ghost from the past, Alan Trigg, known only as the Library Phantom, was exposed by a forgotten sketch and a machine that refused to forget. This is the chilling story of how cold, calculated intelligence brought justice to the families they left behind. The sun had barely risen when they found Emily Carter's body in a cornfield just outside of town. The D on the stalks hadn't even dried, but her skin was already cold. The sheriff stood motionless at the scene, staring at her lifeless form, unsure whether it was the early morning chill or the sight of her torn dress and bruised arms that made him shiver. She was only 17, bright, kind, and known for walking the long way home just to watch the horses grazing near the fence lines. Her parents collapsed when they heard. Her mother didn't scream, she simply sank to the floor, hands trembling, lips parted as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. Her father stared blankly at the photo on the wall, the last one taken of her smiling in front of her school's gym on picture day. The investigation began with urgency, but turned quickly into frustration. There were no tire marks, no footprints worth chasing, just a broken necklace near her body, cheap plastic beads, and a cracked heart pendant, smeared with something that might have been blood or dirt. One partial fingerprint was lifted from the heart, but it was too blurred to match anything. In 1999, the technology was too limited, too crude, no DNA hit, no witness with a full story. One neighbor recalled seeing her near the corner store that evening, laughing with someone in a blue hoodie, but she couldn't remember the face. The grainy security cameras recorded static and shadows, nothing else. The case turned cold in less than 6 months. The town tried to move on, but everyone still whispered her name, especially on stormy nights or when the cornfields swayed too much in the wind. Every detective who touched the file felt the same quiet despair, like looking into a locked room and realizing the key had never existed. The sheriff retired with that case still pinned to his wall, a photo of Emily in the corner of the file, her eyes locked in that final high school portrait. Her mother never removed Emily's bedspread. The pink sheets remained tucked tight, and the books on her shelf stayed untouched for years. Each holiday, she hung an ornament with Emily's name on the tree, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone somewhere would remember something. Time passed, investigators changed, the town grew, new houses built over old roads, and the cornfield was sold off for a shopping plaza. Still, the file remained, marked Case Sen99C, tucked deep in a metal drawer no one opened anymore. Until a young analyst, new to the department and eager to impress, was assigned to digitize old files for a new AI system called ForensIQ. She picked up Emily's file at random, not knowing she was holding the pain of an entire community. As the file uploaded and the system began to scan, something stirred. Not in the machine, but in the air, as if the silence that had lasted 24 years had just been broken. Something was coming, something no one expected. Emily Carter's file blinked onto the screen of the AI system, a ghost from the past rendered in digital form. The new cold case unit had received national funding, a result of increasing pressure to bring justice to families who had waited too long. ForensIQ was hailed as a breakthrough, a machine that could learn from old mistakes, make new connections, and re-examine what human minds had missed. But no one really expected it to work, not like this. The young analyst who fed Emily's file into the system, Maya Jensen, had read the case out of curiosity before scanning it. Something about the quiet tragedy clung to her thoughts. A girl walking home, a cracked necklace, a smudge that might have been a fingerprint. Maya couldn't help imagining the girl's final moments, how she might have felt the air grow cold, how she might have realized too late that someone was following her. That lingering feeling settled in Maya's chest like a weight she couldn't name. When ForensIQ flagged the case with a flashing match possible alert, just 22 minutes later, Maya froze. She leaned forward, heart thudding, unsure whether she was witnessing the future of justice, or just another glitch in a new system. The partial fingerprint had been enhanced with neural imaging, cross-referenced with a decade's worth of digital prints, including ones not previously shared between states. And there it was, Dennis Rowe, a name no one in the original investigation had ever seen. Arrested in 2005 for burglary, released in 2007, never suspected of murder. The match was strong, 99.8%. Maya stared at his file, her mind racing. He was older now, in his 40s, living in Arkansas, far away from where Emily had lived and died. But back in 1999 he had been just a drifter, a face in the crowd. Someone police never even noticed. She called her supervisor, who called the sheriff. Soon, the room filled with quiet urgency. No celebration, no cheers, just silence. Heavy and sharp. Detectives reopened Emily's timeline. ForensIQ kept working, digging into public records, parking violations, surveillance photos, ATM logs, every trace of Rowe's life during that year. It was uncanny. The AI mapped movements and gaps no one had ever thought to connect. He had been near the crime scene. He'd taken cash out of an ATM just 3 blocks from the corner store where Emily was last seen. There was no alibi, no explanation. Maya sat still as the new evidence poured in. Her hands trembled slightly, not out of fear but out of awe. The case that had haunted a town, had haunted her for days after she read it, was unraveling. A fingerprint that once meant nothing had become a voice. And that voice was screaming the truth. When federal marshals quietly approached Rowe's rural home, he didn't resist. He just stood on the porch as if he had been waiting for something. Maybe he knew the past never stays buried. Maybe the guilt had lived beside him all these years, whispering. As the cuffs clicked shut, Maya watched the live update on the screen, barely blinking, as if afraid the system might change its mind. Emily Carter finally had a name, and justice, once thought forgotten, had returned in the form of a machine that refused to let her be lost. The city of Manchester had long buried the memories of the library phantom. Time, in its quiet cruelty, had hunted the edges of fear and grief. But the wounds remained, hidden in the corners of memory. Between 1981 and 1986, 3 women had been found dead near different public libraries, each strangled, each body arranged with eerie precision, and always with a book delicately placed in their hands. The murders had shaken the city's soul. Newspapers screamed headlines, mothers clutched their daughters a little tighter. But after the 3rd body, everything stopped. No more victims, no suspects, just silence. And over time, that silence settled like dust on an unsolved chapter no one wanted to reopen. At the center of the file was a hand-drawn sketch, fading with age. A trembling witness, janitor at the library, had seen someone in a tan coat loitering just before the 2nd murder, but he couldn't recall the face clearly, only sharp eyes and a slight limp. The sketch artist did their best. The result was vague, shadowy, almost ghost-like. It was pinned to the file, labeled possible suspect, that it led nowhere. Without physical evidence or forensic breakthroughs, the case withered under the weight of its own mystery. Officers retired, files were boxed up and forgotten. The families, each carrying an ache that never dulled, were left with no answers. Then, in 2024, the UK's new initiative, Review, was launched. It was designed to revisit unsolved crimes using generative AI, facial reconstruction, and pattern recognition. The aim was simple: give the forgotten a second chance. A technician fed the library phantom file into the system, more out of obligation than hope. The sketch scanned with a quiet beep. A low-resolution face, worn and crude, now under the digital microscope of an AI that had no emotion, no fatigue, and no reason to give up. The system ran silently for hours. Then, without warning, a notification popped up. Match potential, confidence 93%. A name appeared on the screen: Alan Trigg. It meant nothing to the technician at first, just another man lost in a sea of records. But the system continued. layering timelines, job transfers, and public records into a haunting portrait of someone who had moved from city to city during the exact years of the murders. Each victim's local library had a volunteer log. Trigg's name was there, every time. The realization spread slowly, like cold water down the spine. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a pattern long missed, now exposed by something that didn't blink, didn't forget. Trigg had once worked as a hospital orderly. He'd left quietly after each murder, citing personal reasons, never raising alarm, a model employee. Friendly, helpful, harmless. The AI pushed further. It analyzed the books placed in each victim's hands. All were part of a rare relexin, titles long out of print, borrowed, lost, reissued. Review traced those copies. They had all been checked out under Trigg's name, then reported missing. A sketch that had whispered uncertainty now screamed with clarity. A face the world had forgotten was suddenly clear again, as if it had never left. For the families, the pain rushed back with the force of memory unburied. But now, for the first time in 40 years, there was a name. The library phantom had never vanished. He had only hidden in plain sight, waiting for something smarter than human memory to finally see him. The digital sketch hovered on the screen, reconstructed with astonishing clarity. Gone was the soft blur of pencil and memory. Now, a human face stared back with unsettling precision. The AI had done what no one believed possible. It had turned guesswork into a person. Alan Trigg, a name no one had spoken in relation to the library phantom in over 4 decades. But the pieces were falling into place with terrifying ease. Detective Claire Redford sat in her office long after the others had gone home, her eyes fixed on the AI-generated report. The connections it had unearthed were staggering. The dates of each murder perfectly overlapped with Trigg's documented presence in Manchester, Leeds, and Nottingham. Every library had once been his volunteer site. Each transfer had followed a murder by no more than 2 weeks. At the time, those shifts in location had appeared harmless, routine personnel movement in a system too burdened to ask why. But now, they screamed like silent alarms finally triggered. Claire felt her stomach tighten. It wasn't just the horror of what he'd done. It was the realization that the system, her system, had let him slip through. The machine didn't accuse, it didn't feel disappointment or shame. But Claire did. She thought of the mothers she had interviewed as a rookie when she'd first touched this case, women with hollow eyes and questions no one could answer. She had promised them she wouldn't forget, and she hadn't. But she also hadn't been able to give them closure. Now, a machine might do what she couldn't. The AI's most disturbing discovery came in the form of handwritten library logs and journal entries found through archived records. Trigg had developed an eerie obsession with a particular book series, long out of print, hard to find. Each copy had been borrowed just days before the corresponding murder. But what chilled Claire most was what the AI deciphered from his coded writings, journal entries that detailed each killing like performances. The victims were audiences, the crime scenes stages. He described the scent of paper, the way silence echoed between shelves, the precision of his rituals. The search warrant came quickly. His home in Blackpool was modest, neat, too neat. Tucked in a box under a false floorboard in his closet, they found the keepsakes, bookmarks, overdue library slips, yellowed newspaper articles about the murders, all organized by date. A weathered journal, this time not encrypted, lay at the bottom. The final page read, "The curtain never truly falls, only the audience forgets." When officers arrested Trigg, he didn't speak, he didn't resist. He simply stared at Claire as if she too was a part of his final act, an inevitable conclusion to a play he'd written long ago. Claire didn't feel victory, only gravity. The weight of time. The weight of the women whose names had been lost behind the word phantom. Now they had justice, and it had come not from a revelation or a witness, but from a silent intelligence that had seen what the world had chosen to forget. The library phantom had finally been unmasked, not by man but by machine. The alert came as a quiet ping, almost insignificant. Just another data sync between two AI systems across the Atlantic, ForensIQ in the United States and REView in the United Kingdom. It was part of a standard cross-check protocol initiated by international justice departments, meant to spot overlaps between cases that spanned borders. No one expected it to matter. But deep within the lines of old data, the machine saw something no one else had. 2 murders. 2 different countries. A year apart, a 16-year-old girl named Leah Briggs, found in Birmingham, Alabama in 1998, and Emily Carter, discovered lifeless in a Texas cornfield in 1999. No one had ever connected them. They seemed too far apart in time and place. But ForensIQ and REView weren't bound by assumptions. They didn't feel disbelief. They only processed patterns, and they had found one. Both girls were found in remote areas, both missing a shoe, both wearing cracked heart-shaped necklaces. The media had never mentioned the matching details. The investigators on each case had different teams, different states, different goals. But now, the AI had aligned the timelines and raised a new flag. Possible serial pattern detected. The unease spread fast. Maya Jensen, who had first worked on Emily's reopened case, felt her heart drop as she read the AI's full summary. Dennis Rowe, the man now behind bars for Emily's murder, had surfaced again. Records showed he had worked briefly under an alias at a summer camp in Georgia in that same camp had hosted both Leah and Emily the same summer. It was a random footnote in the registration database. A coincidence that no one thought mattered until now. What stunned the investigators wasn't just the connection, but the way Rowe had slipped between lives, between states. Always under the radar. A man who left behind no fingerprints until the day he murdered Emily. The AI's search deepened, pulling in old surveillance logs, bus tickets, rental records. A map slowly came into view of a man who had possibly stalked young girls across state lines, who had hidden in plain sight behind jobs, small crimes, and false names. Detective Avery Coleman, assigned to Leah's original case in Alabama, had long believed something didn't add up. He remembered Leah's mother clinging to her photo, begging him not to let her daughter become just another file, and that's exactly what had happened. Until now, Coleman stared at the screen and felt an emotion he hadn't known in years. Vindication, mixed with something colder, regret. This wasn't just about one man and one murder. It was about how justice had missed him, how the system had left cracks wide enough for a killer to walk through. But now, the cracks were being sealed, not by luck, not by human instinct, but by artificial eyes that never slept, never overlooked, and never forgot. As the case reopened in Alabama, a haunting truth settled over everyone involved. Emily and Leah were not alone, and perhaps, somewhere in old police cabinets or forgotten folders, more names were waiting for the day machines would finally speak for the silenced. The wind felt different that morning in Texas. Not colder, not louder, just different. As the sun rose behind the courthouse, Emily Carter's parents stood holding hands, their eyes fixed on the building where, after 26 long years, the man accused of taking their daughter's life would finally face trial. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with media, investigators and officials from departments across the country. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet reverence for the victim, for the truth, and for the strange, tireless force that had brought it all to light. Dennis Rowe sat stone-faced, older now, worn by time, but unchanged in his denial. Yet the evidence was unshakable: reconstructed timelines, enhanced fingerprints, geolocation histories, and digital matches that had stitched together the truth with clinical precision. The jury didn't need weeks, they needed hours. And when the verdict came, guilty on all counts, it wasn't just a victory for one family, it was a shift in the very fabric of justice. In Manchester, Alan Trigg's flat stood empty. The walls still smelled faintly of old paper and tobacco. Police had cleared out the last of the boxes, and his trial was set for autumn. The media called him the UK's final ghost, a man long thought gone, brought back by technology that refused to forget. For years the victims' families had lived in silence, not out of peace, but because their cries had grown hoarse. Now their voices had been heard, not by chance, not by new witnesses, but by the quiet hum of artificial intelligence, searching through the past like a detective that never tired. Across the globe, the success of these two cases became a turning point. Cold case units in cities like Chicago, Dublin, Melbourne, and Cape Town began integrating AI systems of their own. Review and ForensIQ became the gold standard, their frameworks shared, copied, improved. What began as an experiment turned into a revolution. Thousands of forgotten files were pulled from dusty archives. Unspeakable crimes once frozen in time were thawed open by algorithms that saw beyond human error. But not everyone celebrated. For detectives who had worked these cases decades ago, the victories came with a weight. Some wept privately, knowing they had missed what now seemed so obvious. Others felt conflicted, proud to see justice done, but unsure of their place in a world where machines could outthink them. It wasn't the fear of being replaced. It was the ache of realizing how many families had waited too long for closure that could have come sooner. Maya Jensen stood alone outside her office, watching the sky shift from gold to blue. She had started this with nothing more than curiosity and a desire to make a difference. Now her name was being printed in newspapers and hailed in conferences. But she didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a witness, one who had seen the moment when the past finally surrendered to the future. And as more files were fed into the AI, one by one, there was a sense of something sacred happening. Justice, long asleep, was waking. And in the code, in the pixels, in the ones and zeros, the forgotten were finally being heard.